Hey, this is Will Knight, and we're back with another podcast. I'm your host, and today my co-host is
Jen Comerford, LCSW.
And we are at Howard. Where are we at?
We're at Howard Brown Health.
All right. I wanted you to say it, not me. So today we're talking about recovery. Last week we talked about substance abuse, and today we're talking about recovery. So in your experience, what typically pushes a person to finally say, yes, I'm going to go, I need help?
I mean, I think that experience is very personal to every person, right? So there's this theory of hitting rock bottom, but rock bottom looks very different to everybody. And sometimes people hit multiple rock bottoms before they actually are able to move into a stage of recovery. When we look at like theories of stages of change, most people are starting at a place that's pre-contemplative, meaning that maybe they think there's a problem, but maybe there's not really a problem, or maybe there's some facets of it that could be a problem, but I don't really want to commit to the idea that I have a problem. And so that experience for everybody is really different and really personal. Often it's based on something that has happened that is really hard, that's been a really large consequence for them. But we all experience consequences in our lives very differently. So it is a very personal experience for most people.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back to one of the stories you told me that actually just stuck into my head. And I actually told this story, but to some people about how good our podcast was last time.
Oh, thank you.
And you were telling me, or the audience, that you met a guy who had a tattoo on his arm.
Yep, 27.
27.
Uh-huh.
Can you just repeat that story for the listeners that's listening today?
Yeah, so I was working with a client. This was a really long time ago, and he had the number 27 tattooed to his arm, and I was like, "What? You know, tell me about that." I always ask about people's tattoos. For the most part, they're like, you know, have some story to go with them.
They're very personal.
Yeah, they're very personal, right? It's a really good way of getting to know people. And he had mentioned he went to recovery for the 27th time, and it just stuck. And he couldn't quite articulate what was different about that 27th time. Like, he hadn't hit like a 27th like rock bottom that was harder of a rock bottom than the previous 26 times. He couldn't really articulate if it was like the culmination of all of those stays together that combined to lead him to that place of sticking at 27. But it stuck for a number of years, and you know, by the time I was working with him, he was still in recovery, is what I mean by that. And so for him, it was, even though he had experienced so many like lessons and teachings in recovery, he still couldn't quite articulate why it was that 27th time for him that really stuck and made the difference, and he was able to sustain recovery after that.
Interesting. What is the biggest emotional hurdle people face the first time in recovery, or the first stages of recovery?
Yeah, I mean, my asterisk to all of this is that I'm not myself in recovery, so I'm speaking to my experience of working with folks in recovery, so I want to make sure that I do own that this is not my personal experience necessarily, but what I've seen working with folks is, for a lot of folks, it's fear. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of, can I do this? It's the fear of what does this mean about me? Whether I can do this or can't do this, right? So like, what does it mean for me that I'm going into recovery? Is this a new part of my identity? What does that identity say about me as a person? What are the stigmas associated with that? You know, what happens if I try to do this and I fail at it? What does that mean about me? So it's a lot of like fear-based questions. Most people sort of feel like crap, just transparently, because they're physically going through withdrawal, and they're physically experiencing that exhaustion related to it. There are a few folks that feel somewhat energized, right? Because it's a new thing and there's like hope. Sometimes people haven't experienced hope in a really long time, depending on how long they've been using. And so there can be that like tinge with hope, but there's often a lot of fear that's associated with that first time in recovery, not sure what to expect, what does it mean, et cetera.
And it takes a lot of physical, emotional, and mentally like stress on yourself and the person who's also helping in recovery for that person who's been there several times or the first time.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody, I would say somebody reaching out to get help to their first time in recovery, like, what a brave step. I can't personally imagine. I can compare it to other things in my life, but I don't have that personal experience. But I've always looked at anybody that is coming to recovery, whether transparently it's the first time or the 6th time or the 27th time. Like, there's so much bravery involved. We as a society are often told not to ask for help, and this is really when somebody is saying, I need help, I need to make a change. Change is really hard, I'm fearful, I don't feel good, I don't know if I can do this. I've done all these things that are wrong and bad. I'm nervous about what that means for me. And so it's exhausting and brave, and I think people should really be commended for taking that step for themselves.
What about, for instance, people with this also, I don't know, we're going off topic here.
Yeah.
But I would just think that it's the same emotional and physical as just any like abusive relationship, or because you have people who are in those relationships go to drinking, or they go to the drugs aspect, and then they become addicted.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard. It's like, I don't want to compare one terrible life experience to like another one necessarily. I also think the journeys and the recovery from both can be different. They can be intertwined as well, to your point. Like, there is overlap between folks that are in abusive relationships and substance use, for sure. And oftentimes the recovery associated with those, although related, are not interdependent necessarily. And so I want to be careful not to conflate the two. But I don't know, I often think, like, this reminds me of like my kids who will like get super competitive about stuff and be like, well, this is harder, or I did this, or I've been through this. And so much of everything related to behavioral health, I think, lives in like your resiliency and ability to cope, and that resiliency. I think I may have mentioned last time we talked about like the luck of the draw principle, that like certain people are born with a certain amount of resiliency, and that's why we see siblings that are both in really terrible relationships end up in very different points in their lives. And so one situation, although they're related, they're not necessarily correlated, I guess I would say. And so, and I wouldn't want to qualify as one as like harder, or I think they're just different than, the steps that are taking for recovery, and they have different like life aspects to address as well. And when I think about that too, social determinants of health are a huge part of addiction. They're also a huge part of like a domestic violence or an abusive relationship, but in like really different ways. In general, social determinants of health, though, are really, really important to consider when looking at both recovery and abuse, if that makes sense.
Okay, it makes perfect sense. How do people, or what kind of self-discoveries do people do once they take the sobriety route?
Yeah, I mean, this also does vary, I think, person by person. One of the things that I have found over time is, whether it's like the chicken or the egg philosophy, whether mental health conditions were there that they were self-medicating on the front end, or like all the like monkeying with brain chemistry has created some mental health issues. Oftentimes we see a lot of dual diagnosis, where like somebody very early in recovery all of a sudden has a lot of anxiety or a lot of depression, and that low-lying mental health condition has often been untreated because that person's been self-managing. Again, I'm not sure which created which, but we often just see them often appear. And the truth is, the way that I look at addiction is that it's a coping skill, a very maladaptive coping skill. But when it started, somebody found like, hey, if I use, I don't feel this so deeply, or it doesn't feel as hard, or I'm numb to it, right? And so over time, it becomes a highly maladaptive coping skill, but all other coping skills kind of get tossed out of the water. And so when someone's new in recovery, providing them the ability to have additional coping skills and manage some of those conditions, and then pay really close attention to anything that comes up for them newly in recovery. Again, a lot of times we see that being some co-occurring behavioral health stuff that needs to be managed, whether that's medical management, coping skill management, but that there's like not this magic bullet to recovery, so we need to give folks lots of tools for their toolbox to manage the things that are coming up from them new in recovery.
Okay. In repairing relationships from the person who is addicted, and becoming and telling their truth. What about repairing relationships with loved ones after the addiction happens? That's hard.
Yeah, in my experience, this is like one of the hardest parts of recovery, right? So when people are active in addiction, they behave in a way that addicts behave, and it's sometimes highly manipulative, and sometimes I would qualify it as like, again, resourceful. There are things that you learn to do to survive your addiction and the subculture of addiction that do really impact relationships with loved ones. And it really depends on like the actions that have been taken by the person that is active in their addiction. And then it also depends on the actions they take while in recovery. I think a little bit also depends on how many times they've gone through recovery. So are they working a 12-step model, and have they made amends in the past, which is part of the 12 steps, but then relapsed, which is part of recovery. And so for the non-addicts, that might feel like it wasn't a true amend, right? They weren't truly making amends because they relapsed and went back to their active addiction. Whereas that's not 100% accurate, because again, relapse is part of recovery. People are wounded by the actions that are taken of folks that are active in addiction. And so we can always take accountability and responsibility. This isn't just in addiction, this is like in life. We can always take accountability and responsibility for the actions that we've taken to hurt somebody else. We can't control how they respond to that, right?
Yeah.
And we don't, just because we've taken an action to take accountability and responsibility doesn't mean that the other person will respond to that in a way where they forgive and forget. Or many will forgive but not forget, and sometimes people bring it up a lot. And so it becomes a complicated thing to manage over time. Now, it's very successfully done for many, many folks, and not successfully done for other folks too.
You know what, interesting, you mentioned the dollar bill or the money. When you give people money for things like this. And it reminds me, I have a dollar bill rule now.
Okay, all right, tell me about it.
The dollar bill rule for me is, it doesn't have to be a dollar.
Yeah.
But once that dollar leaves your hands, it's no longer your dollar.
That is right, yeah.
And it's so interesting because sometimes people hit you up for money.
Totally.
All this, right. I mean, you know.
My kids hit me up for money all the time.
Right, same here. Same here.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because it's like you're saying you're hungry or you're poor, but you're going to go out and buy cigarettes or liquor, or you're going to go to the bar and buy a drink. And that bar at the drink is, it's around $10 or whatever, $10 to $20, depends on what type of bar you're going to.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting when people say, hey, can you loan me money? And you know, obviously always ask why.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm hungry, I don't have nothing to eat. But I said, and then all of a sudden, in a 2 seconds or 10 minutes later, they says, oh, I think I'm gonna go buy weed tomorrow.
Right,
or
yeah.
I think I'm gonna go buy, you know, something, you know, I'm going out tomorrow night. So that money's no longer mine.
Well,
That's
it's
my
a
dollar
more
rule effect.
palatable answer for somebody to hear that the money you're giving them is going toward a quote-unquote good cause, right?
Right.
And so people can get down with, oh, I'm providing a meal to somebody that's homeless and hungry, versus like I just bought somebody addicted to alcohol a drink, their next drink. I just enabled their behavior. And I mean, I think I mentioned that's why I started that, because somebody literally came up to me and was like, I really need a drink. And I was like, I appreciate the honesty. And truth be told, addicts are physically addicted to whatever their substance of choice is. So that desire to drink or to use is, I would argue, sometimes more profound than the hunger that they're experiencing. And we see this because they choose to use over feeding that basic need of hunger.
How do individuals begin to process repairing the trust and love after their addiction?
I mean, that is a highly complicated, very nuanced process. Sort of similar to like repairing a relationship with a loved one afterward. I think a lot comes down to what was the relationship like prior to the addiction. what is the recovery process going like for the person in recovery? How many times have they been through this process? How many times has a loved one been through that process with them? Sometimes it depends on their overall relationship and the trust that they've had in the past and how it was violated or broken. So that's like a pretty nuanced, complicated relationship that I would say would be highly dependent to not only the person in recovery, but the person that they're trying to repair the relationship with.
Okay. Have you heard of any kind of like stories that you could share or just kind of mention about some of the truths that people take in recovery?
Like, tell me more about what you're looking for. When you say truths, what do you mean?
Once people, let's say, go back home and they spill their guts, they apologize, they're no longer addicted, or they're in sobriety, you're always addicted.
It's a chronic, lifelong issue, yes.
But is there something like one of the people have said what made them move forward?
Like through that process and maintain sobriety, you mean?
Yeah.
I guess what I can say, and this is like more of a culmination of many people versus like a particular story. Right. But often what I hear from folks is recovery is hard. It isn't like any other chronic health condition. It takes active daily management, sometimes minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day choices that contribute to maintaining sobriety and recovery over time. It's the acknowledgment and acceptance that forever you are going to manage this chronic, lifelong challenge, right? Just like you would diabetes or any other chronic condition that requires daily management. And often it is folks that feel like they have meaning. So for some people, that's a higher power, right? So the 12-step program is related to like surrendering to a higher power. For some people, the spirituality part is really challenging for them, and that becomes a person. A person's complicated because persons are not always dependable, right? And there's lots of fluctuation, especially in relationship. So really, it's finding meaning. I would say the spirituality component is finding meaning, something to attach that's bigger than you are, that you can every day say is worthwhile toward doing that hard work minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, every day. There are days that it gets easier. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Because people also have triggers and cravings during that time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there are people in recovery for years and years and years and still have triggers and still have cravings. And one of the things that's super interesting is about like avoiding people, places, and things. That's like a big, like avoid your triggers, people, places, and things. It's not always so easy to do, right? So like if your family is a trigger for you, but you live with your family and you have no intention of not living with your family, it's how do you manage that trigger, right? And so it doesn't always become about avoiding the person, places, and things. It becomes about when you are confronted with those persons and places and things, i.e. when you are triggered, how do you manage that? What is your plan? How do you every day make a choice related to that? And when you're struggling, what is your plan to go out and manage that real quickly? Who do you have that's a support? There's certainly many different ways to approach recovery and sobriety. The Big Book and 12-Step is an abstinence-only or an abstinence-based model that is highly popular and does work. It works for many people. It also doesn't work for others, right? There is no singular approach to recovery that works. But part of why I think it does really work for folks is it is very tied into the idea of support. You have a home group, you have peers, you have other folks that have gone through never exactly what you've gone through. Nobody can actually walk in your shoes, but understand and have empathy and compassion for the things that are really hard for you that others might not understand. That a sober support can be reached at any time. If you call and say, I'm feeling really triggered, I'm scared I'm going to go use, let's go find a meeting. There's always a meeting to go to. You can always find something. You can always find a support. It's about making that choice in that moment when you're feeling really triggered. We've also seen on PET scans, for example, though, when addicts see a trigger, a lot of times that stop-go function in their brain it's dysfunctional. Over time, it's become sort of dysfunctional. So oftentimes the brain will choose to use before the person's even registered they've had a trigger. And so they've seen that light up on PET scans, and there are many people that are able to manage in that moment and still do not go out and use. Even if the brain is like, ooh, I need to go use right now, they're able to call that sober support in that moment, or they're able to make a choice to go to a meeting, or work their steps, or read the big book, or meditate, or whatever their chosen recovery method is, to practice that in that moment.
Okay. When, excuse me, when we talk about the public, and even parents, I guess, I'm just adding parents in there, what is the most misunderstood about recovery process?
I guess
Or should I say the misunderstanding about the recovery process?
So I guess I want to talk about just the misunderstanding around substance abuse, less about recovery. I think in our society, we believe that substance abuse is like this moral failing. I think I talked about this last time, where I don't know a single person who has not had a drink in their life or tried a substance maybe, but not everybody gets addicted. There's this sort of philosophy, well, if you hadn't tried it in the first place, you wouldn't be in this situation, whereas most people I know have tried a substance. They just, whether it's their genetics or availability,
cigarettes,
right, exactly.
marijuana, alcohol.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, right.
Gambling.
Yes. There's no shortage of vices to get addicted to, for sure. Everybody has something. But we really view substance abuse as this moral failing. Like, this person just isn't strong enough to like overcome their demons. Maybe. I don't really think that's society's choice or view to make on judgment on somebody for, right? I think we don't understand enough about one another to ever say that. I think that leads to an idea that if you go to recovery, like, you need to be strong enough to stay in recovery. And if you relapse, again, moral failing. Everything about substance abuse and recovery is so judgmental about what other people do or don't do, and how they should have done something or what they should have done. We don't actually give credit to the amount, again, of bravery and courage and hard work. Recovery is like exhausting hard work, and you're doing that while battling so many other things that are rising to the surface that you haven't dealt with in years. And so in my mind, that's like the biggest misunderstanding about not just recovery, but like substance abuse in general, is that it's this like idea that the person isn't strong enough, when some of the strongest people I know are the ones out there like kicking recovery's butt every single day, and takes so much more strength in general. So I would argue that people in recovery are some of the strongest people I know, but it's typically seen as a moral failing.
Okay. On difficult days, what usually helps someone stay committed to being clean?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is like different for every person, but I do find that that idea of like what is bigger than them, right? So this is similar in like mental health in general, right? So we see parents whose kids are very reliant upon them. They're less, that's what we call like a protective factor. They're less likely to harm themselves because they know that they have this thing that they have to fulfill a bigger purpose for. And so I think for some people, it's attaching higher meaning, or a bigger meaning to their lives in the world. For some people, that's spirituality. For some folks, it's having a really good, thoughtful relapse prevention plan that has really good supports in place. For some people, it's a transitional object. It really does vary person by person, but often what it comes down to is having a really strong plan and being willing to like execute on that plan. And oftentimes that requires having sort of like this deeper meaning attached to something bigger than them.
Okay. Or shall I say, when people go through recovery, are there milestones or victories that is accomplished?
I mean, a day at a time is the motto, right? So like, for some folks, that very first day of staying sober all day is one of the biggest accomplishments they will have. For some people, it's like their first 30-day chip. For some people, it's a year. I would argue for any person that's struggling with substance use and recovery in general, a day at a time is the right motto, and getting through a day that was really hard is an amazing accomplishment. Sometimes it's getting through the next hour.
Right.
That's an amazing accomplishment. It's sort of having the fortitude to sit down and look at, like, how do I make this really hard choice? And it is a really hard choice. You're physically being drawn to it. You're emotionally being drawn to it. You're spiritually sometimes being drawn to it. So to be able to sit back with all of those pulls and pull yourself back and like make that choice over and over again, I would argue is like a milestone in itself.
Yeah. One more last question before we wrap this up.
Sure.
What message would you like to share with some of our listeners who want to recover but totally feels defeated or sucked? Mm-hmm. What is some of advice? I want to say the best advice, but there's always advice.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's one is over the other.
Sure. I guess I would say, like, to know at your core you're worth it, and to know at your core that you deserve to know what it's like to feel powerful within yourself, and ask for help. People will help. There are always people that will help. We can help here at Howard Brown. Ask a peer, ask a friend, ask a coworker. Reach out, because every person deserves the dignity of feeling like they have the opportunity to get clean and sober.
Okay. Everyone has the chance to live their best life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So where are we at right now?
We're at Howard Brown Health. We're a federally qualified health center. We work medical, behavioral, and dental services. Our core focus is on the LGBTQ plus community, but we see everybody from all walks of life. We're on all parts of the city. And our goal is to really help folks lead very healthy lives and to help them live their best lives.
Okay. Because people could come anywhere from the south side to the north side, north side to the south side.
All over the city. Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Because sometimes people don't want to go in their neighborhood, so they go outside of their neighborhood.
That's 100% accurate. That's actually an excellent point that I don't know has come up. So a lot of times folks, because there's still so much stigma associated with both mental health and addictions, people do want to go outside of their neighborhood. They don't want somebody to see them walking through a door. So I would highly encourage folks, don't take geography as a barrier. There doesn't have to be any barriers if you don't want there to be.
There you go. Thank you very much, Jen. I appreciate you. And thanks, Howard Brown, which is located in Chicago. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Will.